Good afternoon. This is Mother Earth again. I'm so happy that you're here to join me for story time. I want to talk really quick about what we did last week. On Thursday, we were in our OKC Harvest Garden at Cleveland Elementary exploring pollinating insects and pollinator plants in the role they play in pollination. So today, we're going to be talking about worms and the role that they play in compost. This week is known as International Compost Awareness Week, or ICA. Hi Momo, hi Kat and Kellen and Lena. I'm so glad you guys are here. So as I was saying, it's International Compost Awareness Week, and we're going to be reading books about worms and learning about compost. So compost, or decomposition, is a process that happens naturally in the earth. When leaves fall to the ground, they're eaten by the microbes and the insects that live on the ground, and they create food for the plants that are there. The roots can absorb it. But when we compost at home, we're harnessing that process to create a really rich soil for our plants by using our kitchen scraps. So I'm going to read first a book called Wonderful Worms. Hi, Miss Lisa. Wonderful Worms by Linda Glazier. So this is kind of an overhead view of worms and the role that they play. So this is a very simple book. And then we're going to read another book called Yucky Worms that goes into a little bit more detail. So let's start with Wonderful Worms and find out what's up with worms. Earthworms are fat and wiggly, like my fingers and toes. They live where it is cool and dark and damp, where roots spread out like underground trees. So worms live underground with the roots of the plants and other animals that live underground. Worms feel sounds with their whole bodies. They feel thunder when I walk. I wonder how worms feel sounds and why they might do that. They are wonderful diggers. They dig passageways and burrows, but they don't use shovels or fingers or toes. How do they do it? They eat their way through and move along. So the earthworms are moving through these tunnels, and as they're going, they're eating what's in front of them. They stretch out long and thin, and they squeeze in short and fat. Stretch and squeeze, stretch and squeeze. Eat and dig, move and dig. Earthworms mix and turn the dirt as they dig and tunnel in the earth. They make the soil soft and airy so the roots of the plants can breathe and grow. So as they're moving along and making their tunnels and eating the stuff that they find in the ground, they're also helping create air for the roots of the plants to be able to breathe and to access water as well. Worms don't have eyes or ears or a nose, but they do have a mouth. And they need food just like I do. But they eat dirt and rotting leaves. They swallow tiny pieces, and inside the worms, the food changes. So it goes in their mouth and then it changes while it's in their body. When it comes out of their tail ends, it makes the earth rich so plants can grow. So the worms are creating compost. They're creating compost for the plants. Earthworms are my helpers. The underground gardeners. We work hard in the dirt in my garden. They're home. Hi, Linda Mobley. Linda is one of our wonderful board members. I'm so glad you're joining us. Okay, so that was a simple story about worms. And one of the things I want to talk to you about, since we're talking about compost, is the word compost. So compost is both a verb and a noun. So composting as a verb means the act of making compost. And then there's the actual compost that you end up with, which is a noun. It's something physical that you can hold. It's the really rich soil that helps your plants grow. So compost is both a verb and a noun. It's an action and a thing. Okay, so the next story we're going to read is Yucky Worms. Let's see if we can get the little boy in the story to change his mind about worms. Yucky Worms by Vivian French. Hi, Christina. Christina is a wonderful friend of ours. She works for Squeeze Every Drop. She's a water conservationist. Yucky Worms. One day, when I was in Grandma's garden, Grandma dug up a slimy, slithery, wiggly worm. Yuck, I said. Throw it away. Throw it away? Grandma looked horrified. Would you throw away one of your friends? You can't be friends with a worm, I said. You can't even tell which end is which. Yes, you can. Grandma put the worm down. It gave kind of a squirmy wriggle and disappeared really fast, pointy end first. As the rounded end vanished, Grandma said, "There goes its tail." I bent down to look, and I could see it had left a little tunnel. My friend Kellen said worms are not yucky, and he's right. We're going to find out how all the wonderful things that worms do, and they're not yucky. Where did it go? I asked. Home, said Grandma. It's an earthworm. It lives underground. So we learned that the pointy end is their head, where their mouth is, and the rounder end is their tail end. But what does it eat? Dirt? I wanted to know. It eats tiny, tiny stones and bits of dirt, Grandma told me. But worms eat other things too, like rotting leaves and flowers and fruit and dead insects. They're especially like eating at night when it's cool. The stones and dirt help to grind everything up in the worm's stomach, and then the worms poop it back out. We're going to be talking about worm poop in this book. Grandma pointed at the flower bed. Look, can you see? I bent down and I saw what looked like a weird, long, curly worm made of dirt. That's worm poop, Grandma said. It's called a cast. You know when you recycle things? Well, worms do it too. There's still a lot of goodness left in the things a worm eats. And when the goodness comes out again as poop, it helps plants to grow big and strong. And as the worm moves around, under and on top of the soil, the poop gets spread around the garden. So a worm's poop is called worm castings, and when they move around, they help spread it around the garden, and it actually helps the plants grow. That's why worms are my friends. Grandma gave me a thumbs up. And it's not just their poop that's good for plants. The tunnels they dig loosen the soil so roots can stretch out and air and rainwater can get in. So if you look under the soil, you can see all of the tunnels that the earthworms have dug. All of those tunnels help create air in the soil, and they help provide a place where rainwater can get in, so all of the roots of these wonderful, beautiful plants can access it. But it's dangerous being a worm, Grandma said. I stared at her. Dangerous, I asked. She smiled at me. Lots and lots of animals think worms make the most delicious dinner. Birds love them, and so do moles, badgers, frogs, hedgehogs, and foxes. Even some slugs eat worms. And human beings accidentally slice through them with spades and spike them with forks. It's a tough life. Cutting them in half doesn't hurt them, Grandma, I said. They just turn into 2 worms and keep on growing. Grandma shook her head. Poor worms. Lots of people think that, but it's not true. She put her fork down. Time for a snack. Grandma had tea and I had orange juice. Can I dig up a worm? I asked. If it rains, Grandma said, the worms will come up on their own. I took a cookie. But what if it doesn't rain? Grandma winked at me. We'll use the watering can and pretend. I finished my cookie as fast as I could. Can we trick the worms now? So they're gonna trick the worms into thinking it's raining by using the watering can. Grandma filled the watering can and I watered the ground. Then I stood back. I didn't want worms chewing on my shoes. They only put their heads out, Grandma promised, and it'll be a while before they do. So they watered and then they sat back and waited. Grandma was right. I had time to eat 2 more cookies before she said, look. Wow, I said. I could just see the tip of the worm above the ground. Now watch this. Grandma stomped her foot and the worm disappeared. Did you see it? Did it see you? I asked. Grandma shook her head. Worms don't have eyes. They feel vibrations, and a thump like that might mean a hungry bird is landing. Danger. So worms don't have ears, but they can feel people walking, birds landing, so that they can protect themselves. Grandma dug her fork in the ground. Up came lots of dirty and wriggly worms. She picked one up and washed it in the watering can. Mustn't drop it, she said. They can't swim. Grandma put the clean worm on some paper and held it near my ear. I could hear a tiny rustling noise. What's that? They're covered in little bristles, Grandma said. The bristles and their muscles help them move. Remember in the other book when it said long and thin, short and fat? It's exactly how they move. I've got muscles too. I bent my arm so Grandma could see. If you've got so many muscles, she said, maybe you'd like to help me plant my sunflower seedlings. Okay, I agreed, and then I thought of something. When I go to school on Monday, I'm going to say that I've got lots of new friends. Good idea, said Grandma. But I said, I might not actually say they're worms. So in the back of this book, there are some really great ideas. Oh, maybe it's the other book. There are some really great ideas for how you can explore with worms. How to be a wormologist. So you can go outside and look for worm castings in your garden or in the park. That means worm poop. They can sometimes be really hard to spot because it's very small. Leaves sticking up out of the ground. You can look for worms on the surface after it rains. Do you ever see worms around your neighborhood after it rains? You can do an experiment by watering a dry patch of grass or dirt and watching to see if a worm comes up. So take your watering can outside, find a spot in your backyard that's kind of dry, and give it a good water and see if any worms come to the surface. Tapping on the ground to see if you can make the worm believe it's raining. Carefully digging up a fork full of dirt and counting how many worms you find. And you want to be really careful because you want to make sure you don't cut them in half, okay? A worm in the hand. So this is etiquette for holding a worm because we want to be really gentle with them. When you pick up a worm, remember to be respectful. A worm is a living creature. Check out how it feels. Is it smooth? Is it slimy? Can you feel the bristles that help it move? Watch how it moves. Put the worm back on newly dug soil and watch how it wriggles away and digs a tunnel. And then, of course, always wash your hands when you're done. So I had so much fun with you today learning about worms and the role they play in decomposition and making compost. Again, this week is International Compost Awareness Week. I hope you will join me on Thursday. On Thursday, we will be taking all of the things that you need to make a worm bin for inside your house. So we're going to get to explore my worm bin, and then we're going to find out what it takes to make your own worm bin for composting your kitchen scraps. Humans produce a ton of food waste, and all of that waste can be put to good use by learning how to compost. So I hope that you'll join me on Thursday at 2 p.m. You don't have to have your supplies ready, but come join me and figure out how to compost. I'll see you on Thursday. Thanks. Oh, and Hank says goodbye.